Hi yarny friends, I'm Sara Sach and welcome to my crochet channel. Now today is the third Monday in October and that means it's our Scrap Happy Crochet Along Day. Every third Monday of every month we are doing a Scrap Happy pattern. Today's pattern is called the Continuous Granny Square Blanket. It's a fun technique and it makes it super easy to continue adding new colors in, and we can make it as big as we want to. I'll also show you how to add this super simple trim along with showing you my favorite technique for adding a new color yarn in for this project. It's super easy and it's one of my favorite ways when I'm working with lots of different colors. Now what makes this granny square blanket so special is that continuous granny. We're going to go around and around and around, making it bigger and bigger. I like to keep this blanket near my workstation here in my yarn room, and as I finish up a project and I've got a little bit of yarn left, I can go ahead and add that in, or I can throw it in this little tub I keep underneath my desk, and then when I have a few minutes I'll add that new yarn in, and I'll continue to do that until the blanket is as big as I want. You can make a huge blanket to throw over your bed or couch. You can make small blankets for baby blankets. You can make medium-sized blankets for your pets, or whatever that you need. They also make great lap blankets. All right, so you can find this complete pattern with lots of pictures and notes on my blog. And as always, I'll put that blog link down in the notes underneath this video. So to make your continuous granny blanket, you're going to need some medium weight number 4 yarn scraps. Now the amount of yarn you need, of course, depends on how big you're going to make your blanket. And a lot of times when I make these, when I begin, I don't know how big I want to make it. This one's a really nice size, and I'm going to be using this one on my guest bedroom bed. The blanket in there is like this teal color, and so I've got lots of different colors of blues in there, and I think it's going to look really nice on my guest bed as just an extra blanket in case my guests get chilly. But you can use any yarns that you want as long as when you make your blanket you stay in the same fiber. I'm using all acrylic yarns, and also you want to stay in the same yarn weight. If you've got a whole bunch of chunky yarns and you want to make this pattern, you certainly can. Just make sure you use the same weight for your whole project. And of course that weight is going to determine which crochet hook that you use. Now I'm doing all medium weight number 4 yarns, and so I'm going to be using an H hook. If you're not sure which hook to use, go online and you'll find a chart that gives you recommendations of which yarns to use for which yarn weights. The other thing is they're on all your wrappers of your yarns. But if you're like me and you've got a lot of yarns where you just have leftovers from projects, you may not have kept that wrapper. Okay? When all else fails, go to the Crochet Guild of America website and you can get all the information you need on yarn weights and crochet hooks there. Now I'm using the H, the 5.0 millimeter crochet hook, because I am using all medium weight number 4 acrylic yarns. All right, you will need a needle for weaving in, because I'm going to show you how to bring in a new color and have it, and how to weave it in to make it look nice and neat. And then of course you're going to need a pair of scissors. You'll probably have lots of ends to trim off as well. Now we're going to begin our continuous granny in the same way that we start a regular old granny square. So we're going to start with our slip knot, and we're going to chain 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to put the tail of yarn over our hook and pull it through to form a circle. Then we'll tie that stay knot. And that's going to keep our circle from coming undone. Now we're going to go in that circle, pull up a loop, and chain 3. 1, 2, 3. This chain 3 counts as our first double crochet, and we're going to stitch 2 more. 1 and 2, and then chain 2. And now we're going to repeat this 3 times. We're going to stitch 3 double crochets. 1, 2, and 3, and chain 2. 1, 2, 3, and chain 2. And then we'll do that one more time. You'll also notice I stitched over that tail of yarn. And that's because I'm going to gently pull that and close up that hole in the center. All right, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4 sets of 3 double crochet, chain 2. I'm going to join to my chain 3 with a slip stitch. And then I'm going to slip stitch in the next 2 double crochets, and then slip stitch in that chain 1 space, chain 2 space, and chain 3. Now, before we do row 2, I'm going to turn this over. I'm going to gently pull on that, and then I'm going to go ahead and weave it in. I'm the kind of person, I like to weave in as I go. You don't have to if you don't want to. I just like to, especially this first one, just because I don't like having that big hole in the center of my granny square. Alrighty. Clip that off. So for row 1, we have 4 sets of 3 double crochet, chain 2. We join to our chain 3, we slip stitch in those 2 double crochets and slip stitched in the chain space, and then chain 3. All right, so let's do row 2. We're going to stitch 2 double crochets in that chain 2 space, chain 2, and then 3 more double crochets in that same chain 2 space. And chain 2. Now we'll go to the next chain 2 space and stitch 3 double crochets, chain 2, and 3 double crochets. 1, 2, and 3, and chain 2. And see how that looks? And we'll repeat this on these last 2 chain 2 spaces. All right, now my last chain 2 space. 3 double crochets, 1, 2, and 3. Chain 1 and 2. And then 3 double crochets. So the first 2 rows are exactly like a regular old granny square. I'm going to slip stitch in that chain 3. I'm going to slip stitch in the 2 double crochets. Oops. And then I'm going to go in the chain 1 space, chain 2 space, I don't know why I keep saying chain 1, and chain 3. All right, and so there is row 2. So we have 4 sets of 3 double crochets, chain 2, and 3 double crochets. We did that 4 times, then we slip stitched into the chain 3, slip stitched into the 2 double crochets, and then slip stitched in the chain 2 space and chained 3. All right, so we've stitched basically 2 rows of a granny square. Row 3 is where the changes begin, okay? Now, normally we would make another corner in this chain 2 space here at the top, but we're not going to do that. We've chained 3. We're going to skip this here and just leave that chain 3 there and go to the next chain 2 space and stitch 3 double crochets. and chain 2. Then we'll go to the next chain 2 space and stitch that corner like we usually do. 3 double crochets, chain 2, and 3 double crochets. And I know that seems odd, what we just did, but that's what's going to help this granny square blanket become a continuous granny square blanket. 1, 2. All right, let's take a look at that before we go the rest of the way around. We chained 3 in that corner. There's that chain 3. We did not stitch anything in that corner but that chain 3. Then we placed 3 double crochets in the next chain 2 space, chain 2, and then stitched our corner. We're going to do the rest of the way around, stitching chain 2, 3 double crochets, corner, until we get to here. Okay, let's do that. There's our 3, chain 2. Now I'm going to stitch the corner. 1, 2, 3 double crochets, chain 2. Chain 2. 3 double crochets, 1, 2, 3, chain 2. Now we're to the next corner. 1, 2, 3, chain 2, 1, 2, and 3, chain 2, and now we'll stitch 3 double crochets. 1, 2, 3, and chain 2. And this is the way that it should look. And I know that looks odd, doesn't it? But that is the way that row 3 should look. Again, we only stitched a chain 3 in this corner, and then we continued around with our 3 double crochets, chain 2, and then our corner, which is 3 double crochets, chain 2, 3 double crochets, chain 2. And we did that on these next 3 sides. And I know, like I said, I know it looks weird, it looks odd, but that is the way that row 3 should look. So now we're ready for row 4. And the way we're going to stitch row 4 is we're not going to stitch in this corner. We're not going to join to that. From now on, there'll be no more joining until the very end of this project, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to come over here where we stitched this chain 3, and we're going to stitch our corner in this chain 3 space, okay? So we'll go over here. 1, 2, 3, chain 2, and I know I have a little knot here. I'm not going to worry about it just because this is a swatch, but I will show you how to change colors and fix knots at the end of the video. Alright, so we'll just pretend like that's not there since we're doing a swatch. Alright, chain 2. Alright, so we did not stitch in this corner. We stitched in that chain 3 that we put there. We made our corner. We're going to go right over here to our next chain 2 space and stitch 3 double crochets. 1, 2, and 3. Chain 2. Then we'll go to the corner and stitch that normally. 1, 2, 3. Chain 2, and 1, 2, 3 double crochets. Chain 2, and now we have 2 chain 2 spaces on the 3 sides. Alright, so we'll stitch 3 double crochets in those chain 2 spaces with a chain 2 in between, of course. And that brings me to the next corner. 1, 2, 3, chain 2, and 3 more double crochets. Chain 2, 3 double crochets in the chain 2 spaces. Chain 2, and now it comes to this side here. So we'll do our 3 double crochets, chain 2, 3 double crochets for our corner. Chain 2, 1, 2, 3, chain 2. And now we're going to stitch in these next 2 just like we normally do. 3 double crochets, chain 2, and 3 double crochets. And so this is the way that row 4 should look. Your corner on this row is up here. And then you have your other 3 corners here. And then of course, here is our last 3 double crochets, chain 2. And so now for row 5, we're going to start in this corner and work back around. And this is what makes it continuous. You will notice a slight curve as you work with your work because you're spinning in a circle sort of as you do your square. So it will have a slight curve to it. That's just the nature of it because we're going in a circle. And that is the way that it's supposed to look. So don't worry about that. It's not going to hurt anything for the scrap blanket, okay? So in order to work row 5, we've done our last 3 double crochets in our chain 2. We don't have to join anymore. We just go right to that next corner and stitch our corner. And this is where it becomes a continuous or never ending. It's also called never ending granny. And it has some other names as well. I like calling it continuous because you can continue to add lots of colors to your granny until you're done. And you decide when you're done, however big you want it to be. You can make it into a placemat, a pillow, anything. And see the way that works? There's no more joining. You just go, when you go to your corners, you stitch your corners the same, 3 double crochets, chain 2, 3 double crochets, and however many chain 2 spaces that you have, you chain 2, 3 double crochets, chain 2, 3 double crochets. And like on these 3 sides, you're going to the next row basically, and you'll have 3. And then when you get to row 6, you'll have 4 and only 3 up here. All right, and that's what gives you that continuous granny. No more joining. You just keep on going until it's as big as you would like. All right, so I'm going to finish stitching up this next row, row 5, so you can see how it looks. I've completed row 5. Here's my 4 corners. My last 3 double crochets, chain 2, and I'm almost out of yarn. And I want to show you what you can do to make a nice and neat color change in your yarn. All right, so what I do is I'll go to the next stitch. I'll stitch the beginning portion of my double crochet. I'll grab my new color, and I'll finish that double crochet with my new color. All right, and then I'm going to let those drop to the back and go ahead and finish this particular corner. I would finish the 3 double crochets and then turn this over. All right, and I do what's called a little stay knot. One time I pull it like this just to keep it put, and then I'll grab my needle and weave this in. Now usually what I'll do is when I sit down to work on it, I usually have a couple of colors I'm going to work with, and I'll finish up those colors before I weave them in. Like I might have added 4 or 5 colors, and then I'll come back in and weave that in nice and neat into the back. And it's always important to remember to try to stay in the color you just added. This is a gold, okay? And I don't want to weave it into the brown because some of that might show through on the front. And so that's why sometimes I'll wait, but I'll go through just the gold stitches, and I'll wait until I've stitched a few more stitches of this color before I weave that in completely. All right, so here we're going to chain 2. This is a corner, so I'm going to go ahead and stitch 3 more double crochets. Chain 2, and then I'll go ahead and move to my next one. And that's why I'll do a few colors before I go ahead and weave those in, because I want to have enough of the new color to be able to weave it in and have it look nice and neat. All right, so I'm going to pull that just a little, and you need to leave a little bit longer tail. I didn't leave a long enough tail there, but you really need to leave just a little bit longer tail, about 4 inches, so that you can weave that in nice and neat in that same color. All right, and then we'll just clip that off. That's a little knot there that I didn't take out, if you'll remember, because this is just a swatch. But look how nice and neat. Don't look at that. Look here where I weaved that in. It's nice and neat on the back and on the front. All right, and then we'll just continue on stitching row 6 the same way. And I really, really love the continuous granny square, or never-ending granny square, whatever you want to call it, because like I said, I can toss it in my scraps. When I get a few minutes, I can grab my scraps and work on it every now and then when I'm watching, you know, the next Hallmark movie. And then I can weave in those ends that I added, set it aside until I get a few more of that yarn weight scraps. And it is kind of fun to have a couple of them going at once. You may want to have like a chunky number 5 one going and a medium number 4, and also maybe a light number 3. And as you use different yarns, you can add them to the different granny square blankets. It's a really neat thing to have around. And then when it's the size you want, I'll show you how to finish that off and add a nice trim. Okay? Alrighty, so I'm going to continue around finishing up row 6, and then I'm going to show you how to finish it off so you don't have this big edge, and then show you that fun trim that I added to my blanket. So I have completed 6 rows. Alright, so you're going to continue to go around and around and around and around until your blanket is as big as you would like it. Now, roughly speaking, every row gives you an inch around, okay? Just roughly speaking. And I say that way because I say about a rough inch around, because everyone stitches differently. And so you need to measure as you go and make sure the blanket is the size that you want, okay? So once you've made as many rounds that you want, continuing the same way, what you're going to do, here's your last 3 double crochet, chain 2, and all you're going to do is go in that corner and slip stitch. And that's how you finish it off. Now, the next thing we want to do is add a trim. And I'm going to show you how to add the trim that I did on my blanket. Now, I want to change colors for the trim just so that you can see what I'm doing a little bit better. So I'm just going to bring in this cream color, snug that down, And in this corner, we're going to stitch a single crochet. There we go. We're going to chain 1, and we're going to move to this next chain 2 space and stitch 5 double crochets. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. That makes a nice big shell, and that's what I want for the edge of my blanket. Chain 1, single crochet in the next chain 2 space, and chain 1, and then in the next chain 2 space we'll stitch 5 double crochets. Chain 1, single crochet in the next chain 2 space, and chain 1. And you'll continue this around. Whether you're doing a corner or a side, you'll do it exactly the same. And depending on how many rows you have, you may have a single crochet in your corner, or you may have a shell. It doesn't really matter. It's just a basic big shell stitch. Your simple shell is 3 double crochets, but I wanted a nice big shell. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 double crochets, chain 1 and single crochet in the next, chain 1 and the big shell stitch in the next, and we'll do this all the way around the edge of your blanket. And it just makes a really nice edge. And you can do other trims, whatever you want to add. There's tons of different trims that you can use. I just really like this one for this particular project. I just think it's not too fancy, but fancy enough to give it a nice looking edge. All right, and so you'll do this all the way around the whole edge of your blanket until you reach back over here. Another thing to remember is depending on how many rows you added, you may not end up where you'll have a single crochet to put your single crochet in. You may have to add an extra one, and that's where this little spot comes in handy. When you get back around here, you can either skip this or stitch in it as needed, and I'll show you. I'm going to go around here and put the shell stitch around my small square, and then I'll show you how to deal with that. So I've stitched around my swatch, and when you get to the end here, so I've got a single crochet here, chain 1, and it's going to work out just fine. I can come right over here in this little chain 2 space and stitch my shell. But if I couldn't do that, if this was a shell, I would place my single crochet here and then place my shell stitch in this chain 2 space. So that gives you a little bit to play with to know where you can put your stitches and still have it look nice by the way we did that ending. Okay, so I'm placing my shell stitch in that chain 2 space, and then I'll go right to this single crochet here and join. All right, and that's where you have a little bit of forgiveness because you've got a little bit of an extra spot there if you need to make that even out, because depending on how many rows you added will determine whether you'll need to do it that way or not. So here's our swatch that we were working on, and it makes a really nice little pot holder or candle holder, or put your bread basket on it, or put some vase of fall flowers on it or whatever, because it looks like fall colors. And that's what's so great about this pattern, is you can continue to go around until it's as big as you want or as small as you want, like this one here. And these become my favorite blankets because of all the beautiful colors that end up weaving through. We've got bright colors, we've got soft colors, and on this one I even have some sparkle yarn in it. I do have some variegated yarn and some different ombre yarns that I had left from other projects. And when you do the join the way that I did, where you bring it in on that last stitch of the double crochet and then weave it in the back, you get a really nice finish on the back as well as the front. All right, so this is our continuous granny blanket with our big shell trim, all neat and tidy.